I'm Brandon Spano, the CEO of ALLCITY Network, and I'm here with Michelle Deignan, the VP of Marketing and GM of Oreo at Mondelēz. I wanted to ask you, I find it interesting whenever I see the CEO, CMO, or VP of Marketing, GM, and so there's this part of it. It's almost like, it's funny, the Super Bowl week, because it's almost like when the head coach also calls the offensive plays, right?
Yeah.
He's like, hey, I'm not the offensive coordinator, but I'm the best guy here to call the plays on offense, and I also run the team. So I guess before we get into the marketing and the strategy and the spend and whatever, is that kind of how you feel at Oreo? Like, hey, you're the GM there, but when it comes to marketing, you're going to make sure you have your hands on that too.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way I think of of my businesses when I run them is it's full end-to-end responsibility, right? My responsibility, of course, is marketing and making sure we break brands and great campaigns, but it's also making sure we fully execute physical availability, mental availability, and we drive sales ultimately. Because as marketers, that's what we're in the service of doing, right? We have to drive sales at the end of the day. So I always hold myself accountable for that end-to-end leadership and ownership. But of course, who doesn't love to work on the marketing piece and the comms and positioning? It's magic and a privilege to do, if I'm honest.
So let's talk about the ad. First time back since 2013, right?
Correct, yes.
Big shoes to fill from that moment, right? The dunk in the dark.
Yes.
And, I'd love to just hear about kind of what's went into it and, why now and how things are different.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, what a privilege to work in a brand where we're still talking about something that I did 11 years earlier, number one, right? So Dunk in the Dark essentially put real-time marketing on the map. And it was down to the tremendously talented team on Oreo at the time. And really, that's what what we try and do. We try to be front and center of culture in everything that we do. And I joined this business 12 months ago, and I think as we then were thinking about how do we make sure Oreo's at front and center of culture in the right cultural conversations. It's this 110-year-old magnificent brand that spans age categories. And then you see this magnificent opportunity that presents itself in the big game, where you'll have more eyeballs than ever that also span generations. And for us, it was about putting this iconic brand back and marrying it with one of the most iconic sporting events. And that's really the conversation that started around, why this felt like the right time for us to come back to the big game.
Yeah, that's really cool. Real quick, it's really interesting. You spent the last 10 years prior to this managing a line of products. How is it to kind of go back and it's like, you have one brand, this is your baby. There's different variations, but at the end of the day, this is your one thing. Is that more challenging or is it more liberating in some ways? I mean, from a focus standpoint?
Yeah, it's definitely different for sure, managing a portfolio of brands versus one. But I will say the plans that we have and the expectations for growth that we have for Oreo, both here in North America and globally, are vast. So there's no shortage of work to be done and focus areas to lean into. And that's really what I spend my time with my team working on day to day. What are those areas of the businesses that we need to accelerate? How do we keep Oreo front and center in culture? So despite the fact it's a big brand in scale, it actually has a lot of unique areas that we spend plenty of time focusing in, which doesn't feel that different to the portfolio piece that I used to do, to be honest.
Yeah, so going back to Super Bowl, one of the big things I was wondering is why now? I feel like brands always, we actually were just hearing somebody talk about, we're not in this year, it's just not the right time for the brand, but we will be back. So when you do go back in, what makes it to where you feel like, you know what, right now is the time, like let's do it this year? Yeah,
well, there's definitely that piece around iconicity, and Oreo has been around for so long. It's also our job as marketers to make sure it continues to be around, right? And it's in cultural conversation, and we're driving the cultural zeitgeist. So that was definitely part of the decision as we thought about it. Then there's the other piece that is just we know that from a consumer point of view, snacking is still very important to them. So Mondelēz, who's the parent company of Oreo, commissions a report annually called State of the Nation of Snacking. And we know from that report that 75% of consumers are looking for times to snack during their day, that it's a comfort to them. So just knowing what's happening at a macro environmental perspective and the pressure that's on consumers, it felt very right that as a snacking brand, that this felt like a good time to come back into the big game and remind consumers of the great brand that Oreo is.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that actually kind of leads to my next question, which is, how do you decide where you're going to place the brand in a world where you have a lot more options than you did in the past? And you know, this one, obviously, outside of budget, is it's a pretty easy decision to make as far as, hey, like, this is the biggest platform. And if we're going to bring one of America's most loved brands in front of everybody, this is a great way to do it. But I'd love to get your opinion on traditional media and maybe even TV in general outside of these tentpole opportunities. Do you look at it the same way you did 10 years ago, 5 years ago?
Yeah. Look, the reality is the media landscape is changing, right? And it's just simply not the way it was 10 years ago. I mean, social media wasn't as developed as it is now. The way we think about it in Oreo is it's our job to follow the consumer. And wherever the consumer is, it's our job to be there. So, and it's also our job to make sure that we continue to stay relevant for a younger demo. Where we'll connect with them in different places than just traditional TV. So, even if you think about the big game itself, 10 years ago, it used to be people would sit around the TV, they'd watch the game, they'd watch the commercials. Now they sit around with a screen in their hand with their phone. They have one eye on the TV and they've got an eye on their phone. So it's not good enough to just be one single linear way in for consumers anymore. And it's important, I think, as marketers, as we build plans, to build them in a very 360 surround sound way to make sure that all consumers are getting your message. Those that don't, consume linear TV, or those that do at certain times, but you need to make sure we're getting them on the right platforms. And really, that's what we try and do. We try and follow them.
Yeah, so let's dive into that. You have this big 30-second ad. We've talked about it. You've already talked about it earlier today. You're talking about it now. Everyone's going to talk about it. What does the campaign look like around it? On X, on Instagram, on TikTok, Kris Jenner potential, right? Like what does it look like around it?
I mean, there's not one decision we have made as we've planned the big game that hasn't been thinking about this in a 360 way.
Right.
So how we chose our talent, how we teased our talent, how we created content that was created specifically for different social networks to build on Kris's following and to be very authentic to her and her followers. So I'd say what we're really excited about this twist on it idea is that this is just the start of it for us. So, you'll see decisions that are made through the twist of an Oreo in the big game, but this is the start of a platform for Oreo. And you can think about the fun that we're going to have around using Oreo as a decision maker. So as we've thought about our 360, we're working with influencers. We're talking about everyday decisions. What should I wear today? Should I wear a green sweater or a red sweater? Let's twist on it.
I literally, as soon as I read this, I said, this is a spin-off. There's so many spin-offs to this.
That's, what? I think it's a testament to our amazing creative agency, TMA. The day that I saw this idea on the books as we briefed in for the big game, what appealed to me most was its longevity and potential, and how it was going to be much more than just a 30-second big game spot.
Yeah.
And that's really, as we talk about having Oreo in conversation and in the cultural zeitgeist and being relevant with different age demos and profiles, for us, this is the perfect way in, because it's a message that you can twist and, pardon the pun, twist and, make very relevant for very different audiences.
I felt like Kris was a really interesting person to select, and I thought about it a little bit when I was preparing for this interview, and I was thinking she actually checks a lot of boxes. right? And so I think you guys were kind of able, and then similar to the actual spin-off idea, or the twist fate idea that can have a lot of spin-off. She herself is almost foundational in the sense that there's a lot of ways to go after that, right?
Look, 1,000%. Number one, we're thrilled to work with Chris. I mean, she's the most famous momager in the US. She has she's a huge profile. As we thought about this idea of twist on it, and if you look at our communications and our ad, it's about it's a number of vignettes on how Oreo was essentially the decision maker. So we started to think about what are those decisions that have happened in the last number of years that have driven culture. And honestly, there's not many like the whole evolution and revolution that is reality TV. And the reality is, in the early 2000s, Chris's decision to make a TV show changed the course of reality TV in the US. So it felt like a perfect story to tell with this twist on it. But actually, more than that for us, it was about, for anyone who is a follower of the show, they'll know that Oreo has shown up organically in the Kardashians for years. That is, we have not paid for that. They are genuine fans of the brand. They stack Oreos. They show them in their kitchen. So for us, it was a very natural partnership because we knew that they were already big fans of the brand too. So it was kind of a marrying of both of those things that really
Is there an American household, though, that doesn't have complete Oreos laying around?
I mean, look, that is the magic of this brand, right? It is ubiquitous.
It is.
It is beloved, and our job is to keep it that way.
Yeah.
And to, what's gotten us here as marketers won't always get us there. So that's what we've got to keep doing. We've got to keep driving those cultural conversations.
I would just, I think on the marketing side, outside of this, I'd love to go a little smaller. All this has been really big campaign, Super Bowl. Day to day, how do you look at targeted spin now? I mean, is it always national? Is there regions that you're trying to amplify in where you say like market share doesn't feel the same, where we have literal data that shows that it's not the same here? How do you look at that?
Yeah, look, we try and look at, we call them cohorts of consumers.
Okay.
And we understand how can we drive messaging that is more relevant for those cohorts. Because at the end of the day, one general message across a national media is great for some things, but it's not always going to maximize your media dollars. So we try to think about tailoring our message, understanding what insights we can get, and we target then the communications we put out on the back of that. That's an important part of how we reach consumers, and again, kind of how we reach them in an authentic way that hits them and feels right for them versus just a more generic message.
Okay, I have the toughest question yet. Okay. We're going to end it here.
I'm ready for it.
Sure?
I don't know.
One Oreo for the rest of your life, you have to choose thin or double stuff.
Oh, that's an easy one for me. I am a huge double stuff fan. The more cream, the better. So I will say thins is delightful as an evening snack. So I do have it occasionally, but double stuff for me all the way.
Double stuff is good, but thin from the texture standpoint.
It's beautiful.
It's
there's no bad Oreo.
It's crisp,
There's no bad Oreo. They're all great. They're all great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was great. I'm really excited. Good luck on Sunday.
Thank you.
We're gonna play your hardest out.
Yeah, we'll do our best.